Hi, I'm Mary Derbyshire, and I am here to talk with Monika Gross about her work as an Alexander teacher and her work with the Poise Project, which is a not-for-profit organization in North Carolina. Welcome, Monika. It's good
Thanks.
to have you on the program.
Thanks, Mary. It's nice to be here.
So, Monika, can you tell us what the Alexander technique is?
Sure. Alexander Technique or AT, is a very well-tested set of principles that lets us understand how we function. And it lets us then actively understand how our thinking or cognition affects our behavior on a daily basis. So ultimately, it gives us a very brilliant key and a very enjoyable key to managing ourselves in our daily lives. When we learn how to apply AT, when we learn how to apply the principles to ourselves, then they let us be very active in our moment-to-moment awareness of our functioning. And at the same time, they also allow us to be very free not to disturb what is natural. In other words, a very natural, elegant, simple, fluid poise. And by poise, I would say it's that balance of mental and physical coordination. Once we have this understanding integrated into our being or into our self or understanding of ourself, we get more awareness of options in how to go about our daily lives and how to make moment-to-moment decisions. Once we learn the principles, they stay with us for the rest of our lives. In other words, there's long-term retention, which is a really unique benefit of AT, of learning it and being trained in it. The integration of the principles into our sense of ourselves then gives us a really deep satisfaction or potential actual enjoyment of day-to-day life. And very specifically, it gives us a great deal of confidence in how we meet the challenges and the confusions and our fears of the unknown, which is basically human life. So it really gives us a strong toolkit to manage the unknown.
That sounds fantastic. Now, you used the word poise, and I know that you are the executive director of the Poise Project. So
Correct.
So could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, sure. The Poise Project is a nonprofit. It's a United States registered nonprofit. It was launched last year in 2016 with the sole purpose of bringing these Alexander Technique principles or this education to a broader population. So one of the issues with Alexander is that it isn't so well known outside of perhaps the performing arts fields, where it's often very integrated into training programs. That's how I first encountered it. When I was 19, I had my first session with Alexander and my first experience of these principles. And it was so wonderful and so illuminating to me, particularly as a freshman in college with all the confusions that one faces at that time. I found it so powerful that I ended up training eventually to teach, and I've been teaching for over 30 years now. But I keep hearing this, and you do too, I'm sure, Mary, hear this response when you're asked, what do you do? I say, I teach the Alexander Technique, and people say, oh, what is that? And I really decided, after I turned a certain age, that I didn't want to go to my dying day with this echo on the deathbed in my ears of, oh, she taught the Alexander Technique. Oh, what is that? And so the Poise Project is a very active response to this issue of why Alexander isn't known in the broader population. So specifically, our mission is maintaining natural poise throughout all stages and all challenges of life through these educational principles of AT. And so it's a human services organization. It's focused on public advocacy, primarily the advocacy from people who have benefited from Alexander Technique in trying to bring that message to others who are peers of theirs about its benefits. We're focused really on giving voice to those representatives of certain target populations who want to share the benefits with others who share their condition. We've given ourselves a kind of very ambitious tenure challenge, which is to launch a new population initiative or target population initiative each year. And we begin with the question, whom do we want to help? Simple enough, but that's a very important aspect of focusing in on how you're going to deliver it to that population, because each population is different and the surround of them is very different. So it requires a kind of research and education of us to be able to meet the needs of that population, meet them in the community where they live, meet the professionals or industry professionals around them, learn the language that's spoken there, if you will. And so that's a task that we've given ourselves. So for each initiative that we launch, we assemble a team. And that team is comprised, first of all, of people from the population who want to advocate for AT. Secondly, industry professionals who also have an experience of Alexander Technique and would like to advocate for it within that industry. And thirdly, the Alexander teachers that we identify who have expertise in working in that industry or with that population. And so these teams are small, they're agile, they're nimble, they're able to really respond quickly to opportunities, to changes in demographics, changes in the zeitgeist, if you will, new interests. Like, for instance, now there's a tremendous amount of interest in mindfulness, even in elementary schools, in middle schools. So we can address ourselves to that as a kind of in to that community or that institution in the same way that we would bring to another industry or population perhaps the issue of pain management, what happens, what's causing, how somebody can help themselves reduce or eliminate painful reaction in themselves. Our first initiative, which we launched last year, was AT for Parkinsons. And that's what we've been focusing on now. And we had a presence, we had an exhibit booth and a presence at the 4th World Parkinson's Congress in Portland, Oregon in September of last year. We gave individual little lessons and experiences of AT to anyone who came to our booth. We also presented 6 different poster abstract sessions of research that we had done, including case study research and other programs. We did public workshops in Portland. We did teacher training workshops for AT teachers in Portland. And we just advocated for Alexander to the larger community that was there, particularly research scientists and medical professionals. And again, our team was made up of people with Parkinson's who had benefited from AT, people from Canada, some people from Connecticut, some people from North Carolina, as well as teachers with expertise, and as well as some industry professionals who joined us as well, allied health professionals.
And how does AT help with Parkinson's?
Well, Parkinson's is a very intriguing, is a positive spin on it, chronic condition. It's a degenerative neurological disease that affects the brain. Specifically, it affects neurotransmitters, which upload dopamine into our system. And when you're not able to upload dopamine or produce enough dopamine, it's very debilitating. It has very serious consequences in terms of energy levels, ability to control one's movement, and so forth. There are 2 main diagnoses of Parkinson's. One is tremor-related Parkinson's, and the other is rigidity recognized Parkinson's. Now, everyone says you meet one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. It's very individualized. So someone might have tremors even though they have more of the rigidity-based diagnosis, and vice versa. So Alexander Technique is dealing specifically, most helpfully, with giving an individual with a diagnosis of Parkinson's a level of hopefulness that they can develop some strategies and skills for managing themselves, particularly when their motor symptoms are going awry, when their motor symptoms are heightened, and also with non-motor symptoms such as depression, apathy, anxiety. A big one is insomnia. There's a lot of difficulty sleeping, restlessness, and so forth. So the Alexander training, or adapted Alexander-based programming for people with Parkinson's, focuses in on building up the expertise of the person with Parkinson's to be able to choose functional patterns that deliver more optimal postural tone, so that they are less vulnerable to the disorganization and disturbance of the condition itself. In the course of that, of course, if you are feeling more in control of yourself and less fearful, anxious of day-to-day activity, you're less likely to be deeper in those non-motor symptoms such as anxiety. And Robert Davis, who is a member of our team, who's a person with Parkinson's from Toronto, was extremely grateful about how Alexander helped him get back to sleep when his sleep was interrupted. That was huge for him. He was getting maybe 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, you can imagine. And to get an extra 3 or 4 hours a night was huge. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the ways that AT can benefit people with Parkinson's.
And is there science to back this up? Is there science that you could talk about today?
Sure. As you know, with science doesn't prove things. Science indicates potential and indicates likelihood of benefit. And so research has suggested that training in Alexander principles can reduce rigidity, can reduce back pain, which can be a strong symptom of Parkinson's, neck pain, stiffness. It can improve balance. It can facilitate a more upright posture, because one of the primary conditions or symptoms of Parkinson's is what they call the forward neck posture, of really pushing forward and down with our necks and the weight of the head falling back, which is something that Alexander really deals with on a day-to-day basis with people who learn it who have no neurological difficulties. And research has also indicated potential for long-term retention, as I mentioned before, which is really important, because then whatever investment has been made in Alexander courses and private work has this payoff of delivering something which then you create a skilled patient or a skilled client. So when that client or patient goes to their PT, or to their movement disorder specialist, or to their occupational therapist, or their speech pathologist, or their social worker, or to their fitness exercise class, they are better able to be aware of when they disturb themselves and when they need to reorganize themselves. And Paul Recker, who's an Alexander teacher in Connecticut, who has Parkinson's, was diagnosed with Parkinson's after he had become an Alexander teacher. He said that he really appreciates how well it helps him know the difference between, should I push myself in this exercise? Should I push myself now? Is it just that I'm, tired? Or is it time to stop? Has my dopamine really cut out? Have I reached this point where I'm not going to generate more dopamine and I really need to wait until my next round of meds, etc.? And he said that's been really, really helpful to be able to self-monitor in that way, instead of the exercise person being concerned, hey, should I push this client, or should I tell them just to rest? And if the person can monitor themselves, that's great. So that's part of the research that's been done.
So is it a form of exercise? AT?
That's a good question, and many people ask that. I'm sure they ask that of you too. No, it's not a form of exercise. It is education. It's learning how you're functioning and then bringing that self-awareness into anything you do, any activity. Of course, a high activity like exercise, it's very useful. So the Alexander-based principles help the client develop a better self-orientation, a way of thinking that allows them, that combines with whatever they're doing. So other research studies have shown that even combining AT and exercise has helped slow down progress of Parkinson's, for instance. And again, there are two types. There's also diagnoses of what's called early onset Parkinson's, and then there's late onset Parkinson's, which is when you're over 60, generally 55, 60. But if you get a diagnosis of Parkinson's before that, people can get diagnosed with Parkinson's in their 20s. It's a slower progress, and you want to really, really encourage anything that will help slow that process. When people are older, the progression is faster. And again, anything that can slow that progress is welcome. There was one other thing, I just have a note here. Yeah, and of course, they can also use this as a kind of calming strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So that if they're anxious about doing exercise, or they're anxious about falling, they have this as an ability to stop and pause and really not continue until they feel ready to, until they feel as if they can organize themselves around an intention like exercise or like shopping or like tending to their child or a pet and so forth, any activities of daily living.
So I think we're really talking about two very, not separate subjects, but two different subjects. We're talking, or even three. We first started off with and then we started to talk about the Poise Project, and then we started talking about Parkinson's disease and the what word am I looking for? How Alexander technique helps people with Parkinson's.
Benefits of Alexander in that area, yeah, yes. For that population.
Yeah.
And I left out one important thing, if I may add it. When you're working with people with Parkinson's, you're also working with their care partners.
Yeah. And
generally that means a spouse, maybe a child, mm-hmm. someone who's been hired to help. Mm-hmm. Generally it's a spouse. So we see with the Alexander work that we are working with the surround, and there is a huge focus now on interdisciplinary care and what they call the team care, team program, that you need to have a team when you have Parkinson's, and your care partner is part of that team, and the Alexander teacher can be part of that team to teach the care partner how they can cue their spouse instead of just saying, oh, come on, go to your exercise class, you know.
Right.
Right. Wouldn't it be nice if they could give them a little bit of a gentler cueing that could start the wheels in motion, moment to moment to moment, that would end up from the person in their chair to the person in their exercise class, instead of this abrupt, you know, you've got to get to exercise. Right. I find it difficult if someone to get out of my chair. So it can help the communication between spouses or between care partners and people with Parkinson's, because there's a lot of stress for care partners when you're living with someone who has chronic condition, particularly a degenerative condition. And there can be a lot of anger on both sides. The frustration, the exhaustion builds up. And so Alexander can help leaven that, can give some stress management skills to the care partner as well. It's a very important part of the equation.
Well, Monika, it's been wonderful having you here, talking to you on Facebook Live. Is there anything you want to add?
I would encourage people, if you're curious about the things I've been talking about, and if you're interested in the Poise Project as a broad effort, to please go to our website. It is simply thepoiseproject.org. And if you go there, there will be specific information in pages related to AT for Parkinson's, but there'll also be information about our general broad initiatives, our future initiatives, and there will be calls to action on the menu that says Get Involved. We would love it if you signed up for our newsletter to get updates, to learn of the programming that we're working on. This year's, we're launching the initiative this year for Alexander Technique for Pain Management. We'll be collaborating with a anesthesiologist and pain management specialist from the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City. We'll also be working with an Alexander teacher from Australia, Monika Gross, who works with preventing chronic pain and alleviating chronic pain in dental professionals as part of their training. So you'll find more information in general about the Poise Project, and what we would really encourage, if you believe in this mission, if you yourself have benefited from Alexander Technique, we really would encourage any donations and welcome donations, nothing too small, which will really help. And you can either earmark them specifically for one of the initiatives, any of our initiatives, or a general sort of 10-year challenge donation.
And Monika, is there a link to our professional organization, AMSAT, from your at the Poise Project, so people can find teachers in their area?
What we say from the Poise Project, because we are an independent organization that's focused on the student rather than the teachers,
okay,
we say that we send people to basically alexandertechnique.com, which is a general clearing house, if you will, for Alexander Technique information. If you're looking for an Alexander teacher, as you said, there are a number of membership organizations. There's AMSAT, there's Alexander Technique International. There are different ones. If you're listening for internationally, there are different ones in other countries. What you can do is simply Google the words Alexander Technique and your city or town or your zip code or province code, and you should be able to find teachers within that radius. If you have any trouble with that, finding a teacher in your location, either through those membership organizations or through Google searches, contact us at the Poise Project, because there are also teachers who deliver these services via video conferencing, and you can get support for learning some of these principles through one-to-one video conferencing, such as Zoom or Skype, as well as a lot of teachers have DVDs that can be helpful. So if there isn't a teacher available to you, this is one of the big problems that the Poise Project is trying to solve. One of the ways we'll be doing it is actually sending teachers into areas where there aren't teachers to establish the protocols with people, and then teachers can cycle back maybe every 3 months or so to keep that going and support it via distance learning, DVDs, and other methods while the teacher isn't there. We don't want lack of access to a teacher to be a barrier to access to the principles.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And all you people out there, thank you for joining and listening in. And you can always contact me through my Facebook page, and Monika and I are colleagues, so we're always talking between ourselves. Have a great afternoon.
Right. You're my Yankee friend.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you, Mary.